So I'm still just checking to make sure. Okay, there we go. How's the audio? How's the audio, folks? Can everybody hear me? All right. Oh, great. Kingsley said audio okay. Boom. That's what we wanted to hear. So where we got folks from today? Where's everybody coming from? Mark Mock, Jamaica in the house. Wagwan Mock. And then we have where else? Volume's a little low. Let me know when the volume is good for you guys. UK, Romania. New York, Cameroon, Kentucky, Texas, UK. You're hearing just in the right. So you're getting a mono. All right, let me check something real quick. Give you a stereo. Let me see. Settings. Audio. I'm going to restart the program and then let me know if the audio goes to mono. All right, tell me now if you're hearing the audio in mono opposed to one-sided stereo. See, I only have one mic connected and the setting was just set to stereo. North Carolina, Ghana, Zambia, volume good, volume still good. Come on, YouTube. What's going on, Donna? Steve. Welcome, Steve. Volume good. Video quality good too. All right. So everybody, most people seem to have everything coming good from their end. So video good, audio good. All right. So we're going to kick things off. Sweet. Weird. Someone, Alan Hardy, just commented in the chat. It's too long. What's too long? Connecticut. All right. So we got quite a few folks here. I'm seeing 70 viewers online. Welcome. Really hope that you guys are doing well today. I'm a little bit sleep deprived. I was in the hospital little side note, I was in the hospital from 6 a.m. yesterday morning. Nothing is wrong with me, but as many of you guys know, my wife is pregnant. And so night before last night, she started having some heavy contractions, so we had to go into the hospital. We spent the entire day and the entire night and even part of today, but the contractions stopped and she was discharged. So she's home now, resting. So basically within now and the next 2 weeks, baby might be here. So I'm psyched about that. But you know, I stayed up with her and everything like that. So I have doubled up on the coffee. All right, so I'm going to ignore the chat for a little bit, and we're going to jump into the topic of discussion today. And I titled it, Stop Asking for a Band-Aid. And most of you guys know what a Band-Aid is, you know, that little thing you put on your cut. When you got a little bruise or cut, you know, you put a Band-Aid on it, and within a few days, it's better. So the title of today's discussion is Stop Asking for a Band-Aid when what you need is surgery. You need to, you know, go into surgery and either have some stuff be removed or some stuff be implanted and stitched back up, and it's going to take a few weeks, if not months, for that surgery wound to be fully healed. But at the end of the surgery, you'll be like new again. Things will be working the way it should. Volume is low. Hey, see if you can turn up your volume. For those who are saying volume is low, try and see if you can turn up your volume, because I got my volume pretty high right here. And just make sure that if there's anything else on my end, just make sure. All right, so audio is good for most folks. So we're going to roll with the streaming. All right. Back to what I was talking about. You guys just break my train of thought. So the whole idea of trying to fix a more complex issue with a single answer. And so I use the analogy of surgery because I think it's a perfect analogy to use. You know, when someone have, for example, you fall off your bike, you hit your knee. From the outside, you might just have a little bruise, and so you think, I just slap a Band-Aid on it, and within a few days I'll be fine. But what if you actually fractured that knee? What if you fractured that knee and you need actually some more serious medical attention, possibly even surgery? There's no way of telling that without getting diagnosed from a doctor to look at the knee and say, well, you know, this is more than just a surfaced cut. There is something deeper going on. And I wanted to use that analogy as it relates to piano. If I keep looking in the chat, I'm just going to crack up. So, piano, the same thing. I get flooded with a lot of messages, and a lot of them is what I call the looking for a Band-Aid answer to a surgical problem. And so what I want to talk about today is to get you guys to shift how you think about the questions you ask, or even to think about the questions you ask and think about the more deeper root cause for the problem you're experiencing. Because the problem with the Band-Aid answers is that they only lead to more questions. And then those questions lead to more Band-Aid answers. And eventually it's going to lead you back to the very thing you're running away from, which is the fact that you need surgery. And to put this in a more musical phrase, it's going to lead you to the fact that, you know, before I can understand this, I need to work on that. and that and that and that and that and this and that and that, then this will make sense to me. And I can't stress enough how many people are guilty of this. A lot of you guys are guilty. And, you know, the frustration that you're feeling, the anxiety that you're experiencing for the past years or the past months, a lot of it is being caused from your own sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of a delusion, so to speak. Delusion is kind of a strong word. You're intentionally avoiding the issue. Just, if I don't think about it, then it doesn't exist. If I don't think about the problem, then it doesn't exist. Or if I just tell myself enough that this is the issue, then I don't have to think about the thing that I don't want to do. Someone says in the chat, trying to walk before you creep. It's the same thing. And a lot of the messages I get from folks is, hey, I want to be able, can you teach me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do that? Can you teach me how to do this? First of all, first thing, if I don't know who you are and you say, Warren, can you teach me how to spice up my playing? I don't know what skill level you are. I don't know what you know already. I don't know what you don't know. There's so much discussion that we have to have first before we can get to spice up playing. Because first I need to know if you know all the necessary tools that is needed to be able to spice up your playing. Because if I just start to spit out stuff, it's not going to make any sense. So let me take some popular questions that I receive. And I just wanted to talk about these so you can understand when you're posed with an issue, something that you want to be able to do but you're not able to do, how to sort of self-dissect the problem and come to the root cause. Once you fix the root problem, then you will eventually fix that big problem that you're experiencing. Let me see here. So one of the major questions I get is, you know, instead of playing the 5 chord, what can I use to replace it? That's one of the questions I get. And it doesn't have to be the 5 chord. It could be a various chord. Instead of playing the 4 chord, what can I replace it with? Instead of playing the 2, what can I replace it with? Think about that question. So before you ask that question, you have to think, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? Why do I want to replace that 5 chord? One of the possible question answers could be, because I'm trying to go for a different sound. But I want to make sure that whatever sound I go for fits the song, fits the melody, fits what's going on. Okay, so boom, you're trying to go for a different chord and sound. What do we call that in music? When you change a chord, what do we call that in music? We call it substitution. You're substituting a particular chord for another chord. So then you got to ask yourself, do I know anything about substitution? What is substitution? Substituting one chord for another chord. What do I need to know about substitution? So these are the questions you got to start asking yourself. Okay, one of the popular substitution used on the 5 chord is a tritone substitution. A lot of the times you can substitute the 5 chord with the tritone. So then you got to go ask yourself, what is a tritone? What's the whole thing about tritone substitution? But then you realize that, okay, first, before I understand tritones, I need to understand an interval of an augmented fourth. Oh, so I need to know what an interval of an augmented fourth is and how I can quickly see and find that on the keyboard. Good. After I learn what an interval of an augmented fourth is, I need to know what a dominant 7th chord is, because a tritone, at its core, is usually a dominant 7th chord. So, do you know how to play a dominant 7th chord? Can you see your dominant 7th chords in various inversions? Because a lot of the times when you use tritone, you can't just play a root position chord and it works. Sometimes you got to change it up so it matches what you're trying to play. then you have to understand the concept that a lot of the times also when we use a tritone substitution, I have to alter the chord so it match more diatonic sounds. So sometimes I got to raise the fifth, got to include the ninth and raise it. What if the melody lands in the ninth? And so you might end up with a tritone substitution chord that is an altered chord, sharp 5, sharp 9. So you see how things start to get fairly complex? A lot of different concepts now start coming to play. You go, wait, what's an altered chord? And how do I play an altered chord? All these questions starts to come into play. All because you were trying to find a Band-Aid for a surgical problem. And in this case, the surgical problem is you got to go back, learn about augmented fourth intervals, learn about dominant seventh chords, different inversions, learn about ninth chords, learn about 11th chords, learn about 13th chords, learn about altered chords, and then learn about tritone substitution. It's not just, I need to substitute the 5 chord with another chord. It's way bigger than that, and you got to drill down to the root cause, the surgical procedure. Drill down and then realize, come to the honest realization that for me to make sense of tritone substitutions, I need to learn these things first. Because that's the order that's going to help me to make sense of tritone. Does that make sense to you guys there in the chat? And especially I get a lot of these kind of questions from beginners because they hear about the tritone, they hear about the passing chords. Those things sound nice, and all the gospel players and the jazz guys are talking about passing chords, and you go, well, I've been playing piano for a year now. Time for me to learn some passing chords, because if I want to be an advanced gospel pianist, if I want to learn like these gospel guys, it's time for me to jump off into these things. But you hadn't learned anything about the other stuff, the in-between stuff. You completely skipped that. And you think, if I just learn these passing chords, then I don't need to learn anything else. I don't need to learn major scales. Nah. If I just learn this blues lick right here, if I just learn this blues scale, I don't need to learn major scale, because gospel keyboard players don't do anything with major scales. It's a blues scale, and it's, you know, again, trying to solve a surgical problem with a Band-Aid answer. Let's look at another question. Another one of the questions I get is, when improvising, what scale should I play over the chords? Now let's think about that question for a little bit. When improvising, what scale should I play over my chords? So you first have to step back and ask, well, before I can understand what scale to play, I got to understand the chord I'm playing, and then I have to understand the relationship between the scale. Because improvisation is basically playing scale patterns, arpeggiated patterns, which are derivative from the chords or from the parent scale. Those are the two main things you got to keep in mind. And when I talk about parent scale and chord scale relationship, every chord has an associated scale that goes with it. And that's something you kind of have to get into. Now, some people might start to say, man, this is sounding way too complex. I don't got time to learn all of that. And so the question now is, well, do you want to play like me? Do you want to play like the cats you hear in the recording? Because that's the basic question. There are no shortcuts. And so if you want to get to this advanced level, then this is what's required. If you don't want to get to that level, then that's okay. But you can't be asking about scales for improvisation and passing chords for my songs, which are advanced concepts, if you're not willing to put in the work. And the fear, I understand the fear that a lot of you guys have. Because remember, I walked through that fear too. I started piano at 19 years old, where I felt like I was too old. A lot of guys at 19 that I came across could already do a lot of cool stuff that I didn't know how to do. So I felt like if I had to go back and learn all this stuff, I'll never become advanced. But that's a lie. It's a trick. Your brain's playing a trick on you. You can go back, fix the stuff that needs fixing, and scale up to advance in a very short time. Now remember that the whole time thing is relative. Like when someone say, how long it's going to take? Well, it depends on what you consider long. Some people think, okay, if it takes me 4 years to learn this, that's great. That's not long. While some people might think 4 years, man, that's too long. So time is relative for everyone. But the thing is, if you refuse to put in the work, then you will never get there. There will be no silver bullet. There will be no one thing that's going to propel me to the top. Right? And so when someone say, what scale do I play over which chord? You got to go back and learn about the associated scales that goes with each chord. For example, if I play a C minor 6/9 chord, which is C, E flat, G, A, D. C minor 6/9 chord. What scale? What's the parent scale for that chord? Another way of thinking about it is, which scale is this chord diatonic to? It's a C melodic minor scale. A C minor 6/9 is diatonic to the C melodic minor scale. If I play C7 flat 9 chord, what scale is the parent scale for that? Or which scale is this chord diatonic to? And you can say, oh, it's the it's the C Phrygian dominant. Now I can wheel this thing out of my brain because I've been playing it for a lot of years and I also teach this stuff. So at this point, it's ingrained in my DNA. It wasn't always like that. But it really requires a little bit of diligence and study that every chord you play, you want to sort of study which scale it's derived from. Because when it comes to which scale do I play over my chord, that's what it's required. And then we can get into how to make those lines pretty. That's a whole different topic. But, you know, when you see someone improvising, those jazz guys or gospel guys, they're not just randomly playing notes. There's a whole lot of gears turning up here when you're playing. And obviously, the more you practice this stuff, the easier it gets, the faster it comes to you. But at first, I had to sit there, play a chord, and figure out what scale it's derived from. And right now, there are a lot of videos and that stuff. I teach some of that stuff in my courses. So I help to solve some of the problems for you. So instead of sitting there and trying to figure it out, I would just tell you that, hey, play a C melodic minor over a minor 6/9 chord. And then you can go practice how to make that more pretty. All right? Let's take a look at another question. The Bandaid question. And we're going to talk about the surgical response to it. Question 3, it says, when should I use passing chords in my worship songs? I love this question because it's one of the most popular. So I'm going to respond with that with a question. Why do you want to use passing chords in your worship songs? Because if you have to ask, when should you use it? Then an appropriate response would be, why do you want to use it? Because the why will sort of help to lead you to the when. Because if you don't know when you should be using it, then you probably shouldn't be using it. Because again, these things are not just done random. They're not like, boom, all right, gonna just drop a passing chord here without knowing why you're doing it. And then we can talk about the how to do it. Because in reality, passing chords can be used all over the place. But does it work? Does it sound good? Because if you take a song and you just start to dump passing chords in it without knowing why you're doing it, without having some form of musical decision behind why you're doing it, then it's going to sound chaotic. There are some few standard places that passing chords are used, but again, not because a passing chord can be used, that doesn't mean it should be used. And this was a huge realization for me. When I just learned about passing chords, I was putting it everywhere. But learning where to put the passing chord is just as important of learning where not to put it. Because not because the theory says it works, that doesn't mean the song requires it. Every decision you make about the song should be to enhance the song, should be to enhance the worship experience. If you're not doing that, then you're doing the opposite, which is to detract, to make it less, to shine light on you, to make it crowded. And so it does require a little bit of restraint. And this is why I tell folks that these are advanced concepts. It's not to hide these things from you that, oh, you got to wait 10 years until you're advanced before you learn. No, it's because when you're at the beginner intermediate level, there's a lot more things that you need to be implementing in your playing that's going to propel you further ahead than the more glittery stuff done at the advanced level. Because at the advanced level, the theory gets more shaky because it gets more experimental at that level. And without a sort of experience, discipline, and understanding of exactly what you're trying to do, it can sound more chaotic than good. When you're implementing something you're not quite sure about what you're doing. You know, I always tell folks that if you're more of a beginner or intermediate player, spend more time focusing on rhythms, getting real comfortable with your rhythms. The little arpeggiated stuff you can do in the left hand, the little arpeggiated stuff you can do in the right hand. Get really comfortable on working on little melodic motifs, the stuff we call licks or little runs, just like little 4-note stuff. Like if you spend more time on that, it takes you playing way more closer to sounding advanced than it is to start using all these big chords and substitutions and reharm, because that stuff, while it's cool, it can get pretty ugly real quickly, you know. And so, what was the question again? When do I know how to? When should I use passing chords in my worship song? You should use passing chords in your worship songs when you've learned how to do everything else. When you've learned how to play comfortable with all the different voicings of the progression, so you're not just playing stuff in root position all the time. When you've learned how to add ninths and sevenths to your chords and make them sound beautiful. Once you've learned how to, make the song sound full without the use of passing chords. Think of passing chords as the cherry on the top of the cake. Just the cherry, boom, that's passing chords. Everything else, the cake itself and the icing and everything else, is knowing how to use the chords of the song along with the key you're playing in, the scale for the key, rhythms. Those things are the base, those are the foundation that everything else is going to live on. So if you have to ask, when should I use passing chords? Then that question alone tells me that you probably shouldn't even be thinking about passing chords yet, because there's obviously a huge disconnect. Try to ask, more actionable questions. How can I add rhythms to a 1-4-5? Be more specific. How can I add rhythms to a 1-6-2-5 progression with the right hand to make it sound more pretty? Then that becomes more actionable and more detailed, that you can use a specific response by, hey, try doing boom, 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 XYZ in the right hand. Because passing chords, it's too big of a problem to be like, yo, when should I use passing chords? Because they can be used anywhere, but they require a little bit of advanced knowledge. Question number 4. How to spice up my playing? That's another one I get. There are various ways to spice up your playing. We just talked about a few of them. Licks, lines, runs, rhythms, passing chords, substitutions. All of those things help to spice up your playing. So when you say, how do I spice up your playing? A Bandaid response would be, yeah, use some passing chords, some licks, some lines, some runs, some substitution here and there, you know, some secondary dominant. Someone can just throw out those things at you. But what do they mean? And when do I use them? I mean, I talk about the 7 types of passing chords. So when someone say, use a passing chords between the 1 and the 4, which one are they talking? Which one of the 7? And will it work? In which song? Because the context. We got to use passing chords in context. What's happening? You can't just say use a passing chords between the 1 and the 4 without knowing the context. Which song? Because the melody is going to dictate if there is even room for passing chords, or if a passing chord is used, what voicing do we have to use so it match and complements the melody? A whole lot of shebang that you got to think about. You can't just say use the passing chords between the 1 and the 4. It doesn't work. That's asking a Band-Aid question to a more surgical answer. Let's look up one more, and I'm going to jump in the chat and take some questions from you guys. Here's another one. How do I know what chords are being played when I listen to a song? How do I know what chords are being played when I listen to a song? That's a very deep one right there, because basically when a person presents that question, they're saying, I have zero ear training knowledge as it relates to chords and progression. How do I get better at this? And so first we're going to say, well, before you can even hear chord progression, you first got to be able to hear intervals and identify what intervals are. Was that an interval of a third? Was that an interval of a sixth? Was it the interval of a major seventh? Was it an interval of an octave? Once you can identify intervals comfortably, then we can identify the quality of the interval. Major third, minor third. Then we understand the quality of a chord. Oh, this is a major chord. It's a minor chord. You know, you want to be able to even identify what inversion of the triad. Oh, that's a first inversion triad. That's a second inversion triad. The ear, in my opinion, is one of the hardest things to develop. You can develop good technique. You can develop strong theory knowledge in a relatively short space of time. The ear, though, it's a little bit tricky because it's the most intangible thing. With technique, we're working with muscle. And so once you train the muscles patiently and consistently, they will develop, they will respond. Theory, it's just the idea, the understanding why music works. And there's so much stuff out there on theory now. There's books, there's videos. You can sit at the piano and you can see the theory in action. It makes sense. But the ear training, it's this elusive thing. Being able to tell what's going on simply by hearing. It is hard. There is a method to learning it, though. Everybody can learn ear training. But there's a method. And this is where a lot of people messed up. They don't have a method. They go, okay, I'm a keyboard player, so I should be able to hear chords from a recording. Yeah, you should be able to, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it without some guidance as to what to listen for, how to listen, and what am I, take this sort of layman example. If you hear a donkey outside, you know it's a donkey. But then my question is, how you know it wasn't a goat? How you know it wasn't a pig or a cow or a camel? How you know it was a donkey? And you might say, well, I've grew up all my life. I've been seeing donkeys. I hear donkeys. I know what a donkey sounds like because you've seen it and you've heard it a million times. Now, ear training is the same thing. It's hearing something over and over, identifying the thing you're hearing, then eventually, whenever you hear it, you can go boom. Whenever I hear a 1-6-2-5 progression, I can bet my life on it. I know it's 1-6-2-5. Right now, I can hear all different various type of progressions and extensions. But I remember the day, as clear as day. I remember when, so if someone played a 1-6-2-5, I couldn't tell it was 1-6-2-5. I would have to sit there and figure it out. Is it 1-6 or is it 1-5? I couldn't tell because my ears weren't that developed yet to be able to identify and distinguish that this is a 1-6-2-5 progression. Now, over the years of training my ear with specific exercises and tasks to build on that, I was able to hear all these things. And so now I can listen to a recording and tell everything that's going on in the bass, in the guitar, with the keyboard, what specific voicing you're using. But I wasn't always able to do that. But it does require systematic steps. Now, you guys know I just came out with my killer ear training course. I think it's one of the best ear training course. I'm just saying that because I put a lot of time in it, and based on the response that I've gotten so far, a lot of folks think, you know, it is pretty up there. So if you want some help with ear training, go check that out because I think it's one of the harder skills to develop on your own. Without some direction, ear training is one of the harder skills, you know. So when someone say, how do I tell what chords playing in a song? That again, Bandaid question for more surgical response. There's a whole lot more things you want to be able to train your ears to decipher before we can get to hearing chord progressions. But the good news is there is a way, there's a method, there's a system, and you can learn it. So those are just some of the questions I get asked regularly. And at this point, I don't even know how to, some of those questions, to be honest, I ignore because I've answered them so many times. I've told folks, because the thing is, I would prefer if you guys try to start a dialogue with me. Like, I love when I get emails that are like 3 paragraphs. I actually read them because someone will explain to me the issues they're having. And then through their explanation, I can say, okay, this person is a beginner, so this is what they need to do. And then I can respond and say, hey, check out these YouTube tutorials that I've done on X, Y, and Z. It will help you. But when someone just go, I want to learn passing chords in G flat. Who are you? What's your skill level? How well can you play? Do you know your scales? Do you know your chords and inversions? I got to know these things before I can even answer your question. Because most of the people who say, I want to learn X, Y, and Z, the X, Y, and Z is just the symptoms. You need to dig deeper down to the root and go, I need that and that. But let's get real right now. People avoid all of that because the hard truth is once they dig deep and get to the root cause, they realize that, shoot, this is actually going to take some work. And instead of me thinking I'm going to get to the advance in a year, it's probably going to take me more like 3 years or 4 if I be consistent and diligent. And I'm just here to encourage you that, don't run from the work. It's going to help you to get to your goal faster if you just go back and do what is required. Instead of trying to search the web for this one thing, this shiny thing that's going to get you to play the way you want to play, it's going to take you a lot longer and a whole lot of stress and heartache. I have a lot of senior citizens that follow the channel. Some of them are in my program. Senior citizens meaning these players are above 50 years old, some of them above 60. I talked to a gentleman last night that was 81 years old, and he's still putting in the work. And you know, one of the biggest thing a lot of them say to me, brother, I wish I knew you 20 years ago. I would have saved 20 years of stress and just wandering in the musical wilderness. Because I try to encourage folks to go back to beginner. That's my biggest thing. Because I realize that it doesn't, if I take someone who's a beginner and trying to teach them intermediate concept and intermediate advanced concept, it will only frustrate them. For me to be able to truly help you, you got to be able to go back and build that foundation. Going back is not a bad thing. When you go back and try to work on the basics, the stuff that you've been ignoring for years, it's not a bad thing, it's not a discouraging thing. You're actually setting up yourself to be able to propel faster ahead. And so you got to stop looking at this beginners thing as a negative thing. You know, I put out a video on YouTube a few weeks ago. Let me see if I can find it. The one when I talk about video 102, number 102, tutorial 102, when I talk about the path to success. And I sort of break down as a beginner what you should be working on and how you know if you're a beginner, intermediate. And I get a lot of response from folks saying, man, I just realized that after watching that video, I just realized that I'm a beginner. And they said it with such discouragement and such frustration because they thought they were intermediate. And I said, this is great news. You should be saying this with more enthusiasm because now you know the things to do to propel. I mean, the fact that you've been teaching yourself piano on your own, stressed out and worried and just frustrated for years, now you know what you got to do. You can condense that now. The 7 years you spent wandering, trying to figure things out, now that you know what to do, just imagine how far you're going to get in 2 years if you follow this game plan. But a lot of folks treat it as this like discouragement that, shoot, I thought I was intermediate, now I'm beginner. You know, it feels like everything you've been doing is a waste. No. And I say this all the time, knowledge gain is never lost. So everything that you've learned in the 7 years by yourself, you still got that knowledge here. So when you go back to beginner, you're tweaking and fixing the things that you never really focused on. But everything else that you've learned is still there with you, and it's going to help you to get through all that stuff quicker because the knowledge is already there. So it's not a bad thing. And I also talked about the fact that your technique might be beginner, but your harmonic skills might be intermediate, meaning you have a strong knowledge about chords already and chord progression, but you just haven't spent enough time playing scales and arpeggios, and so your technique is a little slow, which is why when you come to playing fast praise and worship songs, why you're struggling. You're not struggling because you don't know your chords. You're struggling because your technique is not there yet. And so that's what's slowing you down. So you go back, you work on some technique stuff, and then you're going to be crushing in a few months because now the fingers can move with the speed of what your brain's calculating, you know? So it's not like, oh, you're a beginner, everything is beginner. No, it's just that there are some areas that is still lagging in the beginner. I know people with great ear. They can listen to any song and tell you what's going on, what chord is being played. But again, because they haven't spent much time on the theory, they don't really know why certain things work. They just know it works because their ear's pretty good. You know, their ear's developed. They've spent time building their ear, but they haven't spent time on the theory or the technique. And so because that part is lagging, it sort of still put them in a late early intermediate or intermediate level, you know. Feel like they hit this glass ceiling and they can't propel. And it's because while you might have good ear, there are other areas that you've been neglecting that you need to work on. And when you work on that, you're golden. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. You got to get more strategic about your musical growth. Don't treat it like this chore thing where you just go, yo, just show me some passing chord, man, and I'm going to be good. if I just learn some passing chords in G flat, I'm going to be good. If I just learn some passing chords in C, I'm going to be good. Like, really start thinking about this like a mathematician. 2 plus 2 equals 4, plus 4 equals 8. You know, you got to be able to add things up. You know, just stop trying to skip the steps. Stop trying, you know, most people don't like to play scales, but I'm hoping by now you really understand the importance of scales. See, I started the 12 major scale series where I'm giving out a video a day. And it's because I really want folks to understand that, you know, once you can play, like a lot of the rhythm issues, this is another questions I get. Yo, how do I separate my hands? Meaning hand independence. A lot of that, you'd be surprised how much of that problem is solved by just being able to play 2 octave scales hands together. Parallel, contrary, like that alone solves a lot of that independent hand issues, you know? So this is my plea. Please, guys, stop trying to skirt the work. The work is good for you. I have never met an advanced player who is not really good with ear, have all his theory dialed and his technique and his repertoire, meaning he knows a lot of songs, and can play them from memory. Now, I'm not saying you got to be able to memorize 100 songs, because reality is not everybody can memorize a lot of songs, you know, but you got to at least have some songs under your belt, quite a few. You got to have good theory, you got to have technique and good ear. Every advanced player I've met, and at this stage I've met hundreds of advanced keyboard players. Every one of them, they got all these 4 areas dialed. You can't just want to focus on one or even just 2. You got to focus on all 3. You got to know your theory. You got to have some technique. You got to have good ear. And you got to have repertoire. Once you work on these 4 areas consistently, nothing will stop you from getting to the advanced level. And getting there in a relatively short space of time. All right. We got 69 people online and the chat is running. Let's take a few questions. So looking at a question right here, right now, Faith Smith says, Warren, can you help me with the things I should focus on whenever I'm practicing? Now, for all of you in the chat, the beginners and the intermediates practice template. These are videos I'm giving away. I'm going to post the link right now. If you want a roadmap and a guide as to what to practice, how do I know what I should be working on as a beginner or as an intermediate, then this is it. It's the practice template. Like a gentleman emailed me the other day and he says, man, I have no motivation to practice. And I said, why don't you have any motivation to practice? He says, because I don't know what I should be working on. And I say, have you downloaded the beginner's practice template? He says, yeah. I said, have you gone through it? No. Then, brother, you downloaded the template and you're going to email me saying you don't know what you should be working on. And you haven't even gone through the template yet. So that's an example of, you know, you're not being proactive because you're trying to think, man, I don't need that practice template. I just need something that's going to motivate me. Well, part of motivation is knowing what you should be doing. I can understand if you don't know what you should be doing yet, but once you know what you should be doing, then you just got to do it. So for those who have not downloaded the practice template yet, or you don't know what I'm talking about, here's the link. I just posted in the chat. Click, put your name, email, and you'll get the practice template sent to you. Download it, go through it, make that thing your sort of Bible, your second Bible at this point. It really helps, guys. It really helps. Like all the stuff I teach on the channel are things that I have personally done over the past 16 years. Things that has helped me that I go, oh, you know, this is when I started to see a progress in my playing once I started doing this. So probably if I teach the subscribers how to do this, then they should see the same result. Like none of these, I don't just make up things. Like it's things that I do or things that I'm currently doing, things that I was taught. You know, these are the things I teach you. So if you really want to make progress, you got to do it. Got to do the work. Question from Steve Walker. I got all my scales, chords fluent. Any which way. I am working on voicing altered chords using your courses. Thank you, Steve. How to get these chords going in the How to get these chords going in the impro? Steve, can you rewrite that for me? I'm not sure how to get these chords going. Is that improv you wanted to write? So I'll wait for you to rewrite that question, Steve. I'm not too sure what that means. Not a question. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Stephanie says, I believe the quality of your practice directly and intermediately affects your playing. How many scales would you practice a day? Again, Stephanie, I talk about this in the practice template. I tell you exactly if you're a beginner, work on this much scales a day. If you're intermediate, you go to the intermediate practice template. It tells you what scales to work on per day. You know? So Steve Walker says, I can play any song, any simple song in any key more or less immediately. It's the altered chords I have problems with. So boom, right there, you know the problem you have. You're pretty good with triads and probably sevenths and stuff. Now it's the altered chords. So that's what you want to spend your time. Make that your singular focus. A big part of understanding altered chords is the voicing. It's the voicing because there's so many dissonant notes. You have to experiment with the voicing. There's a video that I released a few weeks, probably about 2 months ago, and I talk about that, you know, one of the main thing about altered chords is try to alter the chords so they voice to either a diatonic note or one of the blue note from the blues scale. I realize in my experience that those, once you tweak the chords to one of those things, 9 times out of 10 they work. The problem is when they have too much non-diatonic notes in the chord, it doesn't work. So a question says, Warren, can you please tell me the best use of quartals? So you're referring to like chordal harmony, I'm believing. So chordal harmony is just another way to voice chords. It's voicing the chords that they have a nice stacked perfect fourth. So you have like 3 perfect fourths in a row or 4 perfect fourths in a row. They're called chordal harmony, and they're used a lot in some of the jazz stuff, like the jazz stuff of like the 80s, Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and those guys. They did a lot of the chordal stuff, especially when talking about rootless voicings. You know, like if they're voicing a 13th chord, a Herbie Hancock voicing of a say for example a C13th chord would be in the left hand would be E, A, B flat, and D. That would be like a Herbie Hancock standard, at this point, standard gospel jazz voicing. But if you notice, the interval between the E and the A is a fourth, the A and the D is a fourth. So that's what they call chordal harmony. If you want, you can go up now and add a G to that, which makes an interval from the D to the G a fourth. All those are fourth apart. That's chordal voicing right there. And, you know, again, it's just another way of experimenting with voicing when you're working with a lot of big jazz chords. So Steve, you know, just to answer your question again, how to get altered chords into free improvisation. See, the word there that to focus on is the word free. Free improv, meaning it wasn't planned. It's just you playing. That level of freedom comes from experience and knowing the concept back, forward, sideways, upways, downways. So you really got to spend some time studying altered chords. Take nursery rhymes. Take every song that you know really well and start practicing adding alterations to them. You do that for a year, and at that point, you probably will get to the free improv level. You know? Boom, 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 boom. Question. Is it necessary to run, i.e., melodic minor during worship service? Well, it depends what you mean by this question. Is it necessary? Remember, the word necessary is not hard and fast. Better question is, does the song require it? It's all about the song. If you're playing in a minor key and you play a minor 6/9 chord and you want to play a run over it, then that begs for a melodic minor. So again, the decisions you make has to go back to, does the song require it? So when you ask if it's necessary, that's what's going to dictate if it's necessary. When it comes to scale runs is a form of embellishments. Embellishments in itself, meaning they're optional. You don't have to do it. You don't have to play any runs if you don't want to. I like to embellish my songs, so I'm always playing runs. So again, the word necessary is subjective, has to do with what do you want to do in the moment, and does the song requires it? Does the theory supports what you're trying to do? Yep. Let's see. Donna says, could you please say how we should do chord progressions each day? Always in the key we are practicing. In the practice templates, I talk about popular progressions because the practice templates for beginner and for intermediate. And as a beginner or an intermediate, your sole goal should be to get comfortable with chord progressions. And so I list some of the popular chord progressions that you're going to come across fairly often in songs. So you might as well get those under your belt from early. A good way, I would say, to practice chord progressions that sort of reaffirm everything is practice chord progressions in the key that you're working on for songs. So if you're working on a song in the key of F, then it makes sense to practice the chord progressions in the key of F while learning that song. Again, if you go back to the practice template, every day I recommend you practice a different chord progression. Not saying you got to change the song every time you change the chord progressions you're practicing. They're two isolated things. The song falls in the repertoire section of the practice template. And then you have progressions in a different section. So you might be practicing a 2-5-1 progression in the key of F, but the repertoire song you're working on might be, I don't know, a 1-3-5-4. So it's a different progression, but it's the repertoire. So they don't have to be always the same thing. I'm playing 1-6-2-5 progression, so I gotta find a song that has that. You can, but again, it doesn't have to. The important thing I want you guys to know is that the practice template is a guide. It's not hard and fast. In fact, that's why when you download the practice template, you notice I have Word file, I got Windows, and I got PDF. The Word file and the dot pages file and all that is because I want you to edit it, make changes that suits you. So if you feel like, you know what, I know my 1-4-5 really well, then change it to another progression that you don't know really well. You know, I want you to tweak it to your liking. So you don't have to do everything the way I put it in the template. It's just a structure, a guide that you should tweak over time. Because I mean, I only list like, I don't know, 6 progressions. After 6 months, you may want to update that thing with some new progressions, you know? So try to update stuff. You don't have to keep it indefinitely. Constantly tweak everything to your liking. And not just with the practice template. Everything you learn from my channel and my courses, tweak it to your liking. Because if you know, this is one of the beauty about music. None of us are going to sound like each other. If we all sound alike, life would be boring. But even though you guys might be studying from me, eventually your own sound, your own soul, it will come to the surface in your playing. You're going to sound like you. And that's what makes it unique. You're not going to sound like me. Even if you try to copy everything I do, it's going to come out differently. And that's cool. So I want you guys to take the theory, take the ear training, take everything I say with a grain of salt. Because I want you to tweak it to your liking. Because remember that music is part theory and part art. This is the art part of it. It's creative and it's constantly evolving. And so don't deny yourself of your own artistic freedom. We all have something to contribute. We all have a voice. We all have a song. And you want to start to get used to tapping into that side of you. Don't deny yourself of that thinking that you got to do everything Warren say, the way he say it, the way he do it. Because you got to leave some room for your own creativity. Yeah, change stuff around. I could use some water. All right. We got any more questions in the chat? That's weird. YouTube saying the chat's disconnected? Just let me know if you guys seeing the chat. I want to make sure that everything is still running. Let me scroll back through and see if there's any more messages. So I'm not seeing any more chats coming in. I don't know if you guys are I know there's still 75 people online. So say hello in the chat for me if you guys can. Doo-doo-doo. Are you guys still with me? Just plug this thing in. I just realized my computer is running out of juice. Okay, chat's back up. For some reason, I couldn't see anything coming in from my end. Huh. Weird internet stuff happening today with YouTube. All right, let me pick up where I left off. Jesus, if I can find it. There's a lot of chat coming in that I wasn't seeing. So, question from Smooth says, I'm playing chords really well in with my left hand patterns, but I fall apart with any type of melody. I've decided to use method books to help solve my melody issues. Is that a good idea? You don't need methods book. You just got to sit and practice your right hand melody. And let me ask another question with that, Smooth. When you say you have problems with melody, is it the fact that you don't know what fingers to use? Is it the fact that you don't know how to pick out the melody? Or is it the fact that you don't know how to match the melody with the chords? See, there's 3 questions I asked there. So that's the 3 things you need to be looking at. Which one of these 3 things is really causing the issue with your melody? So another question from Benjamin. Do you have any tips to get your left hand independent from your right hand? Yes, 2 things. Practice your scales hands together, contrary, parallel, and the same thing with your arpeggios. That, I guarantee, will be the first step to really gaining some independence. Question. Brother says, how hard do you keep your touch settings? How do you also combine your sustain pedal so as to not sound muddy? So those are 2 questions. First thing, I never mess with the touch settings of a keyboard. The keyboards that give you the options to change the touch response, I never mess with that. The default is usually normal. Keep it there. Learn to play the keyboard with it on the normal settings. It's just a matter of getting used to it. I never mess with. I don't even know if my keyboard has a setting like that now because that's not something I've ever messed with. You know? Pedaling. If you're having issues with pedaling, then that's something you have to spend time working on deliberately. The basic rule of pedaling is that the hands go down, then the pedal. As soon as you change the chord with the right hand, the pedal flutters. I have a great tutorial on pedal on YouTube. I believe it's tutorial 45. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. And I'll post the link in the chat. If these things would work. Jesus, my YouTube is like crawling. I think it's tutorial 45. And let me see. Go watch that. We'll give you some deep insight into how to use the pedal. What advice do you have for someone who came from classical sheet music background and so addictive to reading music? Carol. Funny you'd ask that, Carol, because I'm classically trained. Beauty, though, is I started playing by ear first before I went classical. So for me, it was harder for me to not rely on my ear. I had to rely on my sight. But then I learned how to read sheet music, and I still maintain playing by ear. So now I do both. So to answer your question, what advice do I have? If you're addicted to sheet music, start learning how to play songs from lead sheets. So you have the chords alone written out, nothing else. You're still using your eyes to an extent because you're looking at the chords, but it doesn't tell you how to play the chord. It just say play chord A, then B minor, then D flat. You know, that's a great way to start to get away from it. Now, if you play for your church currently and you read everything, I'm not saying to show up to service to wing it. No. Again, this is something you have to practice at home. Start training yourself from home to not play anything from a score. Lead sheets. It's going to be hard, not going to lie, because habits are not easy to break. You've been trained for years to play from a sheet, and now you're going to try to not rely on that. But it has to be a deliberate thing that you do. At home, start relearning all the songs you can play from lead sheets, meaning just the chords, nothing else. Spend a lot of times practicing chord progressions. Right now I have, let's see, the 12-week beginner, 7 chords, soul chords, fat chords, altered extended chord. I have 5 different chord courses that teaches from beginner to advanced, different chord progressions. Spend a lot of times on chord progressions. That will get you more independent in playing chords and away from the sheet music. Okay? Question, do you have any idea on how to solo jazz progressions, scales that can best use, do's and don'ts? Well, that's a lot of question right there. Remember we just talked about Bandaid questions that require deeper answers. In fact, I think I answered a question like this not too long ago. We talk about jazz improv. You first need to be very comfortable with the entire jazz harmony spectrum of just being able to play jazz chords, right? Then you need to be comfortable with all 12 major scales, minor scales, blues scales, pentatonic scale, and all the modes. Once you can do all of those things, then we can talk about now how to craft melodic improvisations. Because if you don't know those scales yet, we can't have a discussion about playing solos, because all the solos are going to be derivative from those scales based on the chord scale relationship. I have a great course that is like a window into this world. It's called Exotic Sounds, and it's where I teach you some chords to go over different progressions. I mean, scales you can run over different progressions. If you want to know more about jazz improv, check out that course over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. It's a great source to get you into that world of, okay, this is how this thing works. Let me see. Question, what should I learn after chord sequence, I believe? I would say consult the intermediate practice template. It'll tell you what you should learn next. How can I get faster with playing scales? With a metronome. Start with a metronome, and every week gradually increase the metronome into increments of 5. So start with the metronome of like this. Ba da ba da dee ba dee da dee ba dee ba dee ba dee ba. And then each week you try to increase the metronome by 5. That's how you develop speed. You don't just jump from beginner playing soul scales to fast scale. It has to be a gradual thing that is measured. The reason why you start slow is because you want to maintain a steady, relaxed pace. And as you increase the speed, you want to maintain a steady, relaxed pace. When I'm playing my scales super fast, I am just as relaxed and steady as when I'm playing it super slow. And this is why you practice it in increments, and you monitor to make sure that you're relaxed and steady every step of the way. The minute you get to a level where you're shaky and you're making mistakes, stop, Go back 2 steps and stay there for a bit. It's your fingers telling you that I haven't developed to that level yet, so that's why I'm fumbling. And you want to be listening for that. Because if you try to push through that, then you start to develop slips and issues and anxiety and tension and all of that stuff. And then you're going to wonder why I can't play my scales smoothly. Because you've been pushing through those things. As soon as you hit those things, go back. As a beginner, do I have to practice arpeggios? Yes. Arpeggios are practiced at every level. Beginner, intermediate, intermediate, advanced. You just that at each level you practice them differently, you practice them faster. But arpeggios right out the gate, just like scales, is something you want to implement because arpeggios is technique building. And as beginner, you want to start building technique, especially as a beginner because your fingers is not used to doing any of that stuff yet. So, yep, arpeggios, scale, broken chords, everything. You start with that at the beginner's level. Mm-hmm. Let's see what else we can find in the chat. I think YouTube's being a little bit funny today, guys. YouTube is acting a bit funny today. My chat keeps disappearing. Things keeps glitching. I got a very strong, steady internet connection. So I'm not sure what's going on. We'll take a few more questions and then we'll call it a day. See, I'm getting a lot of strange. All right, it seems like we're back online. But yeah, I'm getting some strange connectivity stuff happening here, guys. My sincere apologies. I'm just going to scroll to the bottom of the chat and take questions there. So Smooth say, what's the best way to learn the different rhythms and time signatures? I can play the rhythms, but honestly, haven't a clue what I'm doing. So this is a tricky area, to be honest. One of the things that I've found that helped me significantly over the years is to practice to a drum pattern. So if you have like a Yamaha keyboard that has a lot of those built-in drum patterns, or if you have a drum machine, just try to pull up different drum patterns and try to play along with that. Because really, without the use of some form of either a drum machine or an actual drummer, you won't really know how to play to different styles, different drum beats, different tempos, and so you try to assimilate that for yourself with playing to different drum patterns. That's the best way I find. For example, let me turn this on. I'm just going to show you some different rhythm patterns I have on this keyboard here. See, hear that? If I go to style, see, these are just my keyboard right here has a lot of different built-in patterns. So you practice the different drum patterns, you practice the different time signatures with drum patterns, and that will start to give you a better idea. Also start listening to songs that has the stuff that you want to learn. So if you want to learn more about playing 3/4 time, start finding songs with that time signatures and listen to how the band play together. Listen to how what they're doing. You know, this is a part of an exploration for you to understand how to treat rhythms in these different circumstances. And playing alone, that's what I found, is that if you able to assimilate that via drum pattern, or if you have a drummer that you can just jam with from time to time, that's a good way to practice different rhythms. So Princess says, Warren, I greatly appreciate your online course. Now I know the importance of developing the ear. I would still be stuck in sheet music for years to come. Just know you're on time. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, for those who want to be able to play by ear, that's it. You want to be able to play by ear. So what's the most important thing? To develop your ear. It is really. And it's a, especially if you're coming from the sheet music world, it's a deliberate switch. You have to like put up safeguard in place, practice from home. It's not something you're just going to wander in one day and be like, oops, I can play by ear now. I don't need the sheet. No, 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 no. It's something you have to deliberately switch and go, I'm going to make this a priority. Start prioritizing learning by ear. And that's how it works, you know? So, question, when you're still developing your ear, is it possible to use your knowledge of theory to figure out the directions of the chords? You wouldn't even know how golden this question is. This is how I teach ear training. If you go to my course and go through my ear training course, you'll realize that that's how I teach ear training. That's the only way to learn effective ear training. You have to connect it with the theory. And so for people who already have a lot of theory knowledge, you don't even know the gold mine that you're walking around with. You got to leverage that. If you use your understanding of theory, you can propel yourself with ear training faster. You see, guys who don't know a lot of theory, but they already have a good ear, it took them a long time to do that because they had to learn stuff through trial and error over the years. And so they've trained their ears to hear stuff, they can play stuff. They don't really know what they're playing, but they just know it works and it sounds good. But if you already have the theory knowledge, you can, through the process of elimination, figure out the stuff quicker. And that's how I teach ear training, through understanding, through leveraging the theory knowledge. That's the best way to learn ear training. Because if you can hear and identify from a theoretical perspective what's happening, not only do you learn it faster, but you won't forget it. It's when you hear something and you don't really know what you're hearing, you just know it works. That's when things get tricky because you're constantly have to rely on, does it sound good? It doesn't sound good. I don't know why it doesn't sound good. The theory now can say it doesn't sound good because you can't go from a C major to an E flat major when playing in the key of C, unless you're doing some form of modal mixture. You see how I did that? The theory explains why it doesn't work. The theory also explains why it works. And so you want to approach ear training from a theoretical perspective. It does help. So someone asked, would you teach how to read music? I've never learned. You know, honestly, I don't teach how to read music. I'm only interested in teaching people to play by ear right now, not to read music. Even though I read music, and even though I'm an advocate for reading music, especially for those who have an interest to play professionally or to teach, you should learn how to read. It's not something this channel is focused on. So sorry, but you probably won't see me doing anything as it relates to note reading. The good news is that there's a whole lot of other YouTube channels that focuses entirely on note reading, and I've watched some of them and they're really good videos, so go check those out. Here, I'm just going to clip it to playing by ear gospel music. So Smooth said, is there a certain amount of time signature, or is there too many to count? There are a lot of time signatures, but the only two you probably want to worry about if you're a gospel musician is 4/4, 3/4, 6/8. You don't need to worry about 5/8 and 9/8 and 12/8. Just worry about 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, and that's it. Most gospel music doesn't venture outside of that. Most popular music doesn't venture outside of that, you know. If you're into more avant-garde jazz and the out there kind of jazz, you come across strange time signatures, but if you're just interested in playing gospel and more of a popular style of gospel music, you won't need to go beyond a 4/4, 3/4, or 6/8. Milton, Warren, do you have any videos of playing shout gospel progressions? I want to learn some riff. Unfortunately, I don't. And this is something I need to work on in the future, some shout stuff. To be honest, the reason why I haven't put out anything on shout is because it's not something that's done a lot in my church. We could probably count on one hand the amount of shout stuff we do in a year. It's just not a shouting church. I could play that stuff, but my church don't do a lot of it. It's not a part of what they do. I'm in Maine, folks. You know, it's a 95% white state, so you're not going to find a lot of shouting happening up here. It does happen, but not a lot. So that's why it probably haven't been on my radar that much, because it's not something I do a lot. But I know I need to put out some stuff on shout, and I need to put out some stuff on preaching chords. These are two of the things a lot of folks, especially the preacher chord stuff. The problem with the preaching chord stuff for me is I'm currently looking for some preaching videos that I can use in the tutorial, because every preacher does it differently, and then we also go through a different flow when praying for a preacher. It's not the same thing you do from beginning to end. The flow changes based on what the preacher is doing. And it's extremely hard for me to demonstrate that without an actual preacher going. So I'm looking for some preacher recordings that I can use to demonstrate why I switched to this, why I'm doing that. You know, it changes. And it's just not easy to find clean preaching recording where there's not already someone playing to, you know, so, because for example, I would love to use my preacher, but I keep thinking, how can I get a clean recording of him without me playing? Because I'm there on Sundays. I could easily set up a mic and record him, but then you're going to hear me, you're going to hear the bass player, you're going to hear the drummer in all of that, which would it would be hard for me to really play along to that in a tutorial setting. So I'm looking for clean recordings. Haven't come across that yet. So if none of y'all have some clean, you know, preaching going that I could use, just send them my way to my email. Y'all know how to email me already. war85ren@gmail.com. And then I could put together a in-depth preaching stuff. And especially if they're in various keys, that's even better. So I can show you how I move through the different keys with it. My pastor preaches in the key of C, and he doesn't leave the key of C. I know some pastor preaches between the key of C and E. So they go C, then they go C sharp, then they go D, then they go D sharp, you know. So some pastors just hang around in A flat, you know, because it's all about the vocal range of the pastor. And that's why it changes from key to key and style to style. You know, when you're talking about a Baptist church, you're talking about a Pentecostal church, you're talking about Southern church, or you're talking about a Caribbean type preacher or African type preacher. Like, all of these preachers have a different vibe and style. And so there are a couple things we do when doing preaching chords that changes to match these preachers. You know, you got long tones. The other things we got to talk about is, are you doing preacher chords on an organ or a piano? Because you treat it differently. Like, I'm not an organist, but I have a Nord Electro 3. That's what I play in church, which has a great organ sounds. So I can simulate an organ. I play pretty good keyboard organ, and I use that to back up my pastor. And so I treat that differently than if I'm using straight piano sound to back up the preacher. So it's so many different variables. That's why I haven't done anything on preaching chords yet, because I want to make sure that I'm giving you guys actionable stuff that you can implement in church right away. And without having all these variables that I just talked about, it's hard for me to put out something on that. Yeah, your pastor wants you to learn some stuff, Milton, some shout. Yeah, we do some stuff on shout. We'll do some stuff on shout, but yeah, the shout stuff is we'll definitely get to that. Have you done videos on how to create intros and endings, bridges to songs and progressions? I have done a song on endings, but if I could get YouTube to work today, whenever I pull up YouTube to look for the tutorial, it's not. Let me see if I can do it right here. See if I can pull that up. So, if you go to YouTube, check out tutorial number 17, cool cadences. I go through some cool ways you can end songs. I think I did one on intros, but I don't remember. I've done so many YouTube videos at this point, I'm starting to forget. Yeah, so if you want to look at some cool ways how to end songs, check out cool cadences. And I probably will do one soon on intros for song, because definitely the intro is going to vary based on whether you're playing a slow song, a fast song, you know, give you some tips on that. Milton, you're Puerto Rican? My wife's Puerto Rican. I am in Puerto Rico, so I get different vibes. Yeah, man. And, you know, the whole thing about preaching chord is that it has to be tailored to your pastor. And that's what makes it tricky, because every pastor is different. So what I'm going to do when I create this course is to give you the general rules. And again, you're going to have to now customize that for your pastor. But once you have the general rule, you should be able to do that comfortably. What is the best theory book online? PianoLessonWithWarren.com. That's the best I could tell you, man. Because I don't really teach from a book. I teach from here, from the years of knowledge I've accumulated. So if you want that knowledge, this is the best place for theory. my program over at pianolessonwithwarren.com in combination with my YouTube channel is the best place you'll find theory. There will be no book that have all the theory in one place as I do. Yeah, and so if you want that stuff, I'm your best option. You can do a video on how to get on stage fright, because all this stuff without courage to demonstrate it. You know, I did a YouTube live on how to get over stage fright. And I'm going to see if I could tell you which video it is right now. I got the video here. Let me try something. Let me try. So the YouTube live was published October 26, 2018, and it's the video that comes right after tutorial 67. It's a YouTube live I did where I talk about stage fright, how to overcome it, because I used to have severe stage fright. My hands would be shaking up there. I remember some cases I would throw up before going on stage, like around back. That's how nervous I was. And I got over it. I never thought I would, man. I was like, what am I thinking trying to be a performer when I can't even hold my stomach before going on a stage? And I got over stage fright. Now I play on a stage of thousands of people. I think the biggest crowd I've ever played for had probably like 17,000 people in the audience. Big festivals. I don't get stage fright anymore. You get over it. You will get over it, but you know, it takes practice. It takes just doing it, and it takes a mental shift. That's how I've gotten over practice. So I just realized that I've almost been online for 2 hours with you folks. I'm getting hungry. I need to go eat some food, y'all. So I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to call it a day. So Johnny says, do you have anything on hymnals? Great, you should ask, Johnny, because I am just in the process of starting my hymn reharmonized series. These will be on my website, though. They won't be available on YouTube. These are part of my paid program, and they are called Hymn Reharmonized Series. And I'm going to go through the hymnal. I'm going to pick all the best hymns. People are going to be able to recommend hymns, and I'm going to play them the way I play them in church. Meaning I'm not going to play them the way they're done in the hymnal. I'm going to show you how to reharmonize them so they still sound great, but they got a lot of cool modern chords. So if you really want to beef up your hymn category and just learn reharmonization, the process, you got it, guys. Check out pianolessonwithwarren.com. So that's what I have for you guys today. Almost 2 hours online. Sorry again for the problems with the whatever was going on with YouTube, but someone said in the chat that Instagram and Facebook also had some problems. So, you know, technology. So that's what was going on with the chat. But if you guys really if you're really looking for more serious level courses that goes beyond my YouTube channel, Piano Lesson with Warren, that's where it's happening. I offer membership. You know, the membership is going to become the main thing I offer. And this is a side note for you guys who have purchased a lot of my downloads and DVDs. That's great, but this year will be the last year of that. So if you're interested in grabbing some of those courses, you want to grab it this year. January 2020, there will be no more DVDs. There will be no more downloads. Everything will be done through the membership, which also has a download features. You can download a certain amount of videos per month. It's just a new way I'm taking the website, so that I offer one thing and that's it. But the website is where I pour my heart and soul. It's also where I make my bread and butter. That's where I make my living. That's where I put all of my best knowledge. And that's where I try to really go deeper, significantly deeper in the stuff that I offer on YouTube. YouTube is where I try to just help the masses. But for the serious folks, if you can afford it, my paid membership will transform your playing. And I'm not just saying that because I want you to sign up. Yeah, I want you to sign up. But I'm also saying that because it is truly where all the gold is. It's where I pour everything, where I'm constantly updating it and constantly tweaking things to make sure that the learning experience is smooth, that you guys are really getting the most out of it. And also I offer monthly live coaching sessions, which means I get to talk like this with all the subscribers on camera, but in a coaching session with my piano. We recently started something where I call the hot seat, where each week we got one person and I coach that person. They play for me and I tell them what they need to do to improve this. So it's really actionable, it's really hands-on, and it's like a live masterclass because all the rest of the students get to view in and see how I work with the students. They get to ask questions, participate, just the whole works. Because I really want to transform the gospel music thing. There's too much microwave stuff. Learn this in 10 days, master this. And, we want to give our best to the Lord. We want to give our best music, our best service. So why not the best music, But you got to take this thing serious. You got to invest in your education. You got to spend time crafting your skills. It takes time, folks, but I'm here to work with you guys personally. And once you become a part of my program, we get to dive deeper into all the stuff so you can offer your best service. Being up there playing on Sunday morning, it's a privileged gift that I don't take lightly. And you want to give it your best. Yeah. And so if you can make a difference by investing in you, I think you should. Because you know what? All that skill and knowledge that you're accumulating, you're going to eventually pass that on to another younger keyboard player that's coming up so he can continue the ministry. This thing is a cycle. We passed on the knowledge we have. I'll be moving to Florida. Most of you guys know I'll be moving to Florida next year. And when I go to Florida, I'm going to be looking for a mentor. Not a mentor, a mentee. I'm going to be looking for someone that I can mentor, someone who really wants this thing to work with for free. This is not going to be a paid thing. One person, because right now I don't really have a mentor, a mentee. I don't have a mentee around here, someone that I'm mentoring. When I go to Florida, I'm going to look for that. Someone I can mentor and teach everything I can, because I'm able to do this today because someone mentored me back in 2013. Not 13, 2003. Long time ago. Someone saw the interest and the desire, that burning passion in me, and decided to teach me for free, give me everything they could. And from there, I went on to music school, and here I am today, sharing a lot of this stuff that I've learned through YouTube and so on. So it's important to learn things the right way, the correct way, so that you can eventually impart that knowledge to someone else coming up. All right. So until then, folks, what we say, keep listening, keep singing, and keep practicing. And I will catch you next week for another tutorial. Thank you guys for hanging out with me for 2 hours. I intended for the chat, for the stream only to be for an hour, but when I jump online and start talking with you guys, I could do this all day, So many questions still coming in that I haven't even touched on yet. But I got to go eat. And my wife's waiting for me and stuff like that. So, hey, you guys have a blessed 4th of July. Go enjoy some fireworks tomorrow, but be safe. And we'll talk soon. All right? Have a good one.